Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Finding Solutions channel. So, this episode is titled, When is Trust a Good and a Bad Idea Between Employers and Employees? So, my name is Tom. We've got Ryan and Ben, but I'd like to introduce a really special guest, and his name is Vince Wong, and it's the first time he's been on our channel. Vince has been CFO of Janitronics for 20 plus years, and Janitronics is a very successful commercial cleaning company based in the Boston area with more than 1,500 employees. So, Vince, we're really excited to have you to talk about this really important topic.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, and we know with your experience and that 20 plus years, you'll bring a lot of insights to trust and especially as it relates to uh, frontline employees. So, with
Uh,
that, go ahead, Vince.
Absolutely, Tom. I think trust is very important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in business for 45 years. And this company is turning 45 this year, and we have well over 1,500, close to 1,600 employees,
It's awesome.
all union members. And growing. We're growing in this industry and within this local economy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. 45 years, man. That's really amazing. So, with that, let's introduce the topic a bit and we'll kind of dive into this. So, the idea of trust is really important. I think, if we look back in time 50 years ago or even 100 years ago, there was this advantage that companies took over employees, I think time and time again. And that's where the idea of unions came from and employees' rights and labor laws and all those things. And we almost take it for granted now that trust is a big part of that relationship between an employer and employee. And especially in modern times, I think there are exceptions to this, but I think for the most part, we all get that. The trust is really important. But today, what we really want to dive into deep is some of the good areas of where the data shows that trust is important and why. And I think we have some good topics of conversations there. But what's less talked about is, when is trust a bad idea? There are certain areas of employment in that relationship where it can actually lead to some unforeseen consequences. So let me, with that, dive into just a quote here. So, trust is like the air we breathe. This is from Warren Buffett. He said, when it is present, nobody really notices, but when it's absent, everybody notices. So if you want to create an employee workplace where there's innovation, there's motivation, trust is critical. And I think we've all been in environments where there's not a lot of trust. I think all of us in our lives. And that fosters an environment where you don't want to stick your neck out. I have a quick story. I mean, I've had in my career times where I've had people over me where there wasn't a lot of trust in what we were doing. And what it did is it created an environment, at least in my environment, where nobody wanted to take any risk. And because of that, the lack of risk taking, there weren't the best ideas because failure wasn't an option. So trusting in that environment and the lack of trust really led to a lack of us having some of our best ideas, which we're going to talk about. All right. So let's talk about trust. And I'm going to turn this over to you guys to talk a little bit about it. But there's 4 reasons to trust an employee. This is related to 2017 Harvard Business Review published kind of a summary based on a study they've done. And Vince, this is right in your neck of the woods there at Harvard, all you smart people over there. These are the 4 areas that they identified where trust is really important. So the first one, trust increases productivity. So what can we talk about in our experience? What does that really mean, increasing productivity, and why is trust important to do that?
Yeah, I don't know, Vince, if you have any examples from, I think a lot of times I know from my experience working with you and other companies that, we think, oh, cleaning companies, it's so simple. It's just this easy, operation. And then I don't think they realize how complex it can be and the trust involved, not only with your employees, but also what's required to have your employees going remotely to all of your clients' locations. And so I know this is a huge factor for your company. I don't know if you have any examples
Yeah,
of that in the cleaning industry, because like I said, I think a lot of people oversimplify that as a business, and it's a much more complex than I think people realize.
Absolutely, Ryan. And you know what? I mean, it's not just that we trust our employees. Our clients need to trust us. We're the company that comes in when everybody leaves, and we're cleaning space that contain lots of valuable things, such as information, proprietary information. There's works of arts in some of these places. There's just very valuable things that we're entrusted, to keep clean and safe. And their working environment is a very important piece of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and
And
then
I'll go ahead, Tom.
go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, I think that's, yeah, that just really drove the point home to me working with you over the years and how important that and critical that is. There's biomedical facilities and, like you said, some very proprietary information that you have to trust your employees, your client has to trust you. But if you don't foster that trust within your employees, it's difficult to be able to send them out and have your clients rely on you and not create situations that are going to harm the business eventually, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we clean rooms where there's millions of dollars of product sitting in there, going through there, and a potential breach of that clean room could cause that entire batch of product to be disposed of, and that's huge. And we trust our employees, to follow the correct procedures, the gowning requirements, all the different steps that they need to take to get into that clean room and not destroy any product.
And
Yeah, that's
would you?
go ahead.
Everyone keeps cutting you off, Tom. But would you rather have your employees focusing on those procedures and getting the job done, or focusing on framing whatever they're doing in a way that has to build trust for you? Like, if there's no trust, all I'm going to worry about is making sure that whatever I'm doing is perceived as good, so that hopefully that trust is built. But if the trust is already there and I feel it, then I'm free to do whatever I need to do to make sure it gets done well.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, there's different thresholds of trust within those different environments. So, for instance, in a clean room environment, it's really, it's regulated. It's a regulated industry. The FDA regulates that and has lots of regulations for that. So there really is an exact procedure. You have to follow these certain criteria to sort of get into there. We do trust that our employees will follow that. Otherwise, it will be picked up in environmental testing and stuff like that. That our employees are bringing in particles into a clean room environment when it shouldn't be. But in other areas, you want to general office cleaning. You want to trust your employees because you don't want to actually have to micromanage every single thing that they do. They encounter things every day that's outside of our regular cleaning program. They may see that somebody left a diamond ring in a sink when they were washing, and we entrust them to return that ring when they find such a thing. So, I mean, it could be a ring that's an entire year of their salary, and we've had numerous people return things that are very valuable to our clients.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
so that's an interesting concept, that productivity isn't just what work gets done, but how it's done and the quality. And you can't really prescribe a program that kind of covers all of the different bases. You'd think with cleaning, it's straightforward, but like you're illustrating, there's so many different variables. Productivity is about, hey, that the employee trusts the employer enough to know that they're going to be taken care of, that if they work hard, that they're going to be incentivized, and that means they're going to do the best job they can. And that's a great point.
Yeah, and I believe a majority of people, the trust goes both ways. It's a mutual trust. Employers trust the employees to do their job. Employees expect to be paid accordingly, when they do their job.
Yeah.
But there are going to be outliers, right? There are going to be people who try to sort of cheat the system or cheat the program. And
Right.
I think with anything, there's going to be that certain level of people who try to game the system. So
Yeah.
within any system, I think there's going to be some level of gaming that businesses will have to
Right.
decide whether that's part of doing business, or they have to strengthen their protocols to sort of limit that type of cheating.
Yeah, great point. So number one, trust increases productivity. How does it increase and enable collaboration? So I don't know about cleaning. I know in our world, as we build software and do other things. I mean, if you don't trust your teammates and the employer, it's hard to collaborate. I mean, just the simplest of all principles is that you cooperate with people that you trust more than you would if you don't trust them.
Well, in the cleaning industry, it's almost the same thing, right? So we have multiple buildings. Some are vertical floor plates with high rises with many floors, or some are that has these giant footprints with only a couple of floors. So they're big buildings. So we design cleaning teams differently. Sometimes we'll do team cleaning where they'll do a certain specific task, and everybody trusts that they're going to get that task done. While others, smaller floor plate buildings where one person will do all the tasks. So in those different instances, the foreman of the building would have to trust that each person is doing their fair share of the work. Otherwise, they're not going to complete the cleaning program within the budgeted hours.
And how does that trust, what's that dynamic like between the foreman or the supervisor and the team? And how important is that relationship in kind of the trusted relationship when they encounter things they don't expect, or when they have to go into an environment where they have to collaborate?
Yeah, there's always something that there's wrenches thrown into a cleaning program all the time. I mean, a tenant may be moving in and have a ton of boxes that they're disposed of. We don't have that extra hours to sort of budget it in there to remove all that extra cardboard and clean up the space after they're done. So the foreman trusts the other cleaners to say, hey, let's help cleaner on the third floor out, because we know that there's just a significant amount of work that they're not going to be able to complete their task.
I imagine that probably helps with the third one there too. That the creativity and innovation. If you can trust your foreman, your supervisors to collaborate and work with your clients directly, and even then to come up with, you probably have your programs that you do, but each building probably has some unique nature to it, or the client wants something very specific or different. And that allows them probably to have, the trust allows them to foster some creativity and innovation.
Absolutely. I mean, the cleaning industry has always been looked at as a commodity when it really isn't a commodity. I mean, every building is special. It requires certain things that are different in every building, depending on the tenants that they have within the building and the different requirements. Clean is a word that I believe most people understand, but everybody perceives clean differently.
Exactly.
Right, subjective. Yeah.
Right. So it's that whole circle of trust. Everybody has to be on board with the same expectations to be able to meet that cleaning requirement that everybody wants.
Well, and I think that really defines the human working experience, as if it is nothing is a commodity when it comes to people getting work done. That's why we work, is we're creative and we're innovative and we can work together. So that completely makes sense to me. I guess the last one here to round this one out, how does trust facilitate good conflict resolution? Because if there's a need for creativity and innovation, it really means that something's gone wrong, a wrench was thrown in, and that is always an opportunity, I think, for conflict.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one. So we have instances where some tenants may have misplaced something and says, oh, the cleaners took it. It must have been them. They were the last ones in the space. I left it on the desk. And we've proven time and time again, 99% of the time, it wasn't the cleaner that took them. Either the person
Right.
mistakenly put something on top of the recycling barrel, and we're trained to say anything in that barrel goes. No matter what it is, we don't question it. They put it
Right.
on there, we throw it out. You know what I mean? So because they can't just start questioning every single thing in every single barrel, otherwise they would never get their jobs done. So our protocols is anything within those black or blue barrels, you sort of throw out,
Yeah.
regardless of what it is. And again, it's expectations. A lot of times the tenants aren't aware that that's the protocol. I mean, that's our cleaning protocol. And a lot of other times it's just simply misplacing. Somebody thought they left it on their desk and they took it home by accident or whatever. And 2 days later they find it at home. These this is where trust helps us resolve these type of conflicts. We trust our employees completely, and we always back them up unless it's proven hey, there's a camera. We caught Joe Smith walking out the door with this thing. Okay, we totally get that. We'll fix it. We'll correct it, and we'll make whatever amends we need to make. But if it was, short of that, we trust our employees to do the right things, and we believe that they didn't take anything.
Imagine if you're an employee and you just finish working at a site, and then all of a sudden your employer is now gunning for you, saying you took something. I'm probably not going to want to be productive. Probably not going to want to be creative when I'm next working at that building. And so you having their back helps that productivity, creativity, and all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
and it creates a contagion. Bad employment practices will flow throughout your whole organization, and then cause other people, not other employees, not to trust the employer, and that's when things can go south pretty quick.
It's funny as you learn about the details of every business and every industry, but I would never have thought about that tension and stress that comes from a missing object with cleaning. That makes total sense. I mean, I would never have thought that's a source of conflict, but I totally get it now as you explained it. And you got to have all that trust, like Ben just said, like you just said, between the teammates, supervisor down to employees. Employees know the employer has their back, et cetera. So that's fantastic. So these are 4 reasons. I'm sure there's way more reasons that trust is important because, as we said at the beginning, trust is a matter of making sure the employee feels comfortable to get their job done. And you can't ever fully define the job to get done. It is always a creative endeavor. So let's move past the positive side, and we could spend another hour on the positive elements of trust and why trust is so important between an employer and employee. But I think the lesser discussed side of this is, when is trust a bad idea? We always want to trust employees. We want to motivate them, all for those reasons. But there are times when trust is simply a bad idea. And Vince, I think you hinted at this a little bit earlier when you talked about processes and gaming and some of that stuff. But I think the next several items we'll talk about, they all have a commonality, which is when there isn't a need for trust, don't have trust. Because trust implies a requirement. All the things we talked about where a human's doing a job requires them to do something where we trust that they get it done. And it's not part of necessarily a process. So let's walk through some examples of when we feel trust might not be a great idea. So the first one I've got here.
Real quick, the way you reframe that was maybe not like necessarily a bad idea, but when it's just not necessary. I think, and that's kind of what we're probably going to talk through here. But a lot of times people think, oh, it was a bad idea, and that kind of has a negative connotation. But I think really we're just talking about that there's technology and reasons and things that allow it where it's not necessary, and it eliminates the need to have potential conflict and to ruin trust within an organization. So I like the way you rephrase that with where it's just not needed sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a better way to put it. It's not needed. Don't have trust where you don't need it.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. I mean, in areas where it's just black and white, trust should not be the issue. It's only an issue when there's a gray area, right? That's when trust is either given or destroyed by people is within that gray area.
Yeah. So talk, Vince, a little bit about expense reports. You're a CFO. You're in the finance. You do a lot more than that, we know. But when you have somebody purchase something and they need reimbursed for it, I assume you require them to provide a receipt of some kind?
Absolutely. And I think that's just standard procedure across, finance is when it comes to, money, people will try to basically submit things that are going to benefit them, right? But money is black and white. I mean, you spend $10, I expect to pay you back $10.
Right.
Whether they submit an extra receipt out there or not, that's where trust comes in. You trust that they're going to do the right thing and only submit whatever they expense for that particular outing or whatever that they went to. But there are certain times where people lose receipts, and you have to trust your employees to say, hey, I lost my gas fill up last week, and it's $70 or whatever it is. So we need to provide that level of trust. Yes, they do traveling for work, and we expect that they put in something. Was it 70? Was it 65? Was it 8? that's where trust comes in and say, you know what, Tom never does anything wrong. It's fine. I think he's okay. I trust
Yeah.
that he's submitting the correct thing, so I'm just going to approve it. So I think it's, although it's black and white, but there's going to be instances where you do need to trust that person.
Yeah, absolutely. But as a program, I mean, I can imagine a world where receipts weren't possible. Let's say that it wasn't possible to track exact expenses, then yeah, you'd have to trust. But we live in a world where 99.9% of the time I can take a picture of my receipts, submit it as part of an expense report, and we remove trust from the equation. And then there is not even an issue of trust between the employer and employee because there doesn't need to be one. And the exceptions are the exceptions. Okay, so expenses, we all agree. I think you're right. I don't know of a company on the planet that doesn't require some kind of proof of the expense as a program to reimburse. And even with companies that have, we all know and have heard stories of owners, co-founders of companies, small companies where this isn't done. And what it leads to is that term moral hazard when it comes to finance. You don't want to create a situation where there's moral hazard, meaning somebody has a temptation to expense something they shouldn't. And we've all heard those stories. And part of it is that it's not about, I don't think those co-founders started off by saying we don't trust each other. One was just tempted to not turn the receipt in or to inflate some expense or to claim an expense without proof. And that can grow into a bigger problem over time. So just have a program in place to never have trust be an issue.
Right.
Okay, here's another example.
Also, Tom, in finance, I mean, it's when we present financial reports and stuff, there has to be
Right.
credibility. I mean, for
Right,
it to be
right.
credibility, and there is, it's black and white. We have to submit numbers that are accurate and are true. So, and not only that, it's a government regulation when certain the banking for
Right.
banks to sort of vet your company correctly, they need accurate records, and to provide accurate records, it's documentation and backup. So finance
Yeah, can you imagine accounting running on trust on
yeah.
your accounting reporting and documentation and taxes? It
Yeah,
just doesn't
I
work.
don't think the IRS will be that trusting of us.
And it annoys all of us. I get annoyed too, all of the regulations, and whether there should be those regulations or not is a secondary conversation. But if there is a regulation, especially as a company, taxes are one example, other accounting practices are another, but we really should take trust out of it where we can, right? It's the risk of failure is too high. And for the most part, you don't need trust to be part of this. I'm trusting that the food, if I'm working for a restaurant, is less than a certain amount of degrees in the tray to be healthy. Well, most companies have a process to make sure that we don't trust that. We measure it. So maybe, Vince, talk a bit about government regulations. I know union regulations may enter this. How is trust appropriate, and when is it not appropriate in your world?
Well, again, when you're submitting financial statements to banks and other regulatory agencies, there's no need for trust. You submit what's accurate, what's documented, proven, documentation to your CPAs, your people who are creating your tax returns, and the banks that rely on that information to extend credit to you. I mean, these are things that it's really not, it doesn't involve trust. It's just accurate portrayal of your company's performance.
Yeah. And how about union rules? Why do unions even need to exist in your world? If you could just, if the employees could just trust you, the employer, what purpose does the union negotiations that you're a part of play in this?
Well, let's look back at why unions are created, right? Unions are created so that companies don't take advantage or abuse the workers, and making sure that they're not putting undue burden on people, or expectations on undue expectations on cleaners. Without unions there to protect them, there's going to be other companies that will sort of push the limit on their employees. Hey, you can clean 10,000 square feet an hour. Well, how big is a typical house? 2,000, 1,500, 1,000 square feet. Can you clean your house in an hour? I highly doubt it. Now
Right.
you're asking a person to clean 10 of those houses in an hour. Is that possible? So those are the things that the union unions are there to protect. I mean, I think unions started with manufacturing because people were getting killed or injured
Right.
in unsafe workplaces and stuff like that. But I think unions now, are more about collectively speaking for the staff, that the employees that are doing the grunt work, saying, hey, we want to be treated fairly, we want to be paid a living wage, we want certain benefits that comes with providing a fair day's worth of work. And that's as a negotiating member of this local union, I understand that. I get it, but there's a fine line. We need to be able to be competitive within this market because we are competing with other non-union companies as well who don't have that additional cost. So it is a fine line to walk because there's no mandate saying a company needs to hire a union company. It's just they're willing to do it because they don't want the issues that involve when they don't hire a union company to perform the services. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of companies out there outside of, say, a very central area that will use non-union employers. And those are the areas that we can't compete in because we have such high overhead, having all union employees.
And whether a union's appropriate or not within a company, that aside, the negotiation between you and the union, once you've come to an agreement, the reason that trust isn't an issue is you're going to throw trust out and say, okay, we have an agreement and we need to honor the union agreement, and trust doesn't need to be part of that. We have certain things we need to be obligated to that are part of that agreement, and we need to do it. So you need,
Correct.
as best as
Yeah.
possible, to put processes in place where you remove trust to comply.
Yeah, once a union agreement is signed, it's typically signed for 3 to 5 years. It's fixed in the contract, regardless how the economy does. It doesn't
Right.
matter. These terms have been pre-negotiated. These employees will get their standard increases, regardless if we're in a recession or in an economic expansion. They're going to get those increases and those benefits that were negotiated, 3 to 5 years prior. And yeah, once that agreement's in place, the trust really isn't needed because we're guided by that collective bargaining agreement.
Right. Yeah. So regulations, government regulations, union regulations, trust really should be, as best as possible, removed from the equation because those things are settled, and try to make processes and systems that will remove the ability for somebody to go around those rules. Just make it not a matter of trust. Anything else on regulation before I move on?
No.
All right, we got two more to kind of round this out as examples. We've talked about this one a bit, so we don't need to belabor the point. My daughter is a cashier at a local sporting goods store, and every end of the shift, they have to reconcile the till with the money that started in the till and what was sold, and they try to true it up. And it's often not perfect, but the reason, I mean, she could easily go to her employer and say, "Hey, you don't trust me? Why don't you trust me? I'm not stealing money." But again, this is another example where money is involved, and this includes all the accounting stuff we talked about. Why trust? Why would trust be needed when you can have a simple process to just find out the truth where you can remove trust from the equation? And Vince, I assume as a CFO, this one hits home for you when we talk about accounting. Oftentimes trust is something you try to remove at every turn, I would assume.
You do. You try to remove it. And in your example, Tom, yeah, I mean, we do trust employees to not sort of take from the register. But there are times where it doesn't balance, and it doesn't balance because there could be a mistake involved. Your daughter could have given the wrong change to somebody and
Absolutely.
caused the register to be short. So you can't automatically say that she took the extra $10 and pocketed it. No, she could have made a mistake. She could have given someone, $30 change instead of $20
Right.
change, and she made an honest mistake. Do you sort of punish her for making a mistake? No, we're all human. We're going to
Right.
make mistakes.
But let's just say trust was the way that it was done. It would be chaos. Think of all of those registers if there wasn't a process where you remove trust, then you get into the world of, it's just not honest mistakes. You're into the world of moral hazard now, because now everybody has that money sitting there, and you can, at least with this process, chalk these up for the most part to mistakes. Whereas if trust was the primary means of dealing with money, whether it's accounting or otherwise, like we've said, I think it creates an environment where you can have a lot of problems, tons of problems.
Absolutely, Tom. I think 99% of the time, I can't imagine one scenario where we're dealing with money relies on just solely trust. I mean, there's got to be processes and procedures that tie out these things, such as reconciliation of the cash draw at the end of the shift. They're there for a reason. They're there to make sure, one, that the company is reporting everything properly and recording, their cash receipts correctly. And two, it's just to keep the company solvent, because if you didn't do those steps, I'm sure that company will not survive.
And
or you
not every company
payments and use technology to eliminate some of the need for even having to do it. So
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're becoming more of a cashless society anyway. So you go out into public now, most people don't even carry more than
technology, and that can add processes to just eliminate a lot of this overall. So
the cash register just is a symbol of every company has a cash register, and that's the double ledger in the accounting books, right? Everybody has cash coming in and cash going out, whether it's dollar bills or not. And that's where trust shouldn't be part of it, for sure. But that's a great point. Technology helps to mitigate a lot of that. And actually, technology does facilitate removing the need for trust. And it has a ton in the past, and it's doing more and more moving forward, which, let's end with this next one. It's kind of our last example of when trust isn't needed. But trust with time tracking kind of combines a lot of these together. I mean, time is money. For most companies, time is the major expense. It's the employee's time. So how does trust play into time tracking?
Well, trust and time tracking, it's another thing, like we spoke about earlier, where 90% of the people do the right thing. They have a schedule. They're supposed to come in at 6. They leave at 10. They'll get in. They'll clock in. They'll clock out. Then you're going to have a certain level of people who try to game the system, right? They'll try to clock in. Nobody's looking. They're going to walk away from their job site, go do whatever they're going to do, come back later on at night and clock out. I mean, those are certain things that I guess you trust your employees to do the right thing, but there's going to be a certain level of people who abuse that trust, no matter what sort of, policies you put into place to sort of prevent it. There's going to be people who want to do the right thing, and there are going to be people who don't want to do the right thing. Otherwise, you won't have bank robbers or thieves or, drug dealers or, these. Not everybody wants to do the right thing. But most people do want to do the right thing.
Yeah, I know an example you've shared with me in the past, I think, Vince, when you went looking for a technology solution for this, and I've talked to other CFOs and other organizations that even like honest people, we tend to just round in our favor, right? So if you have people using paper timesheets and they're just filling out a paper timesheet at the end of the day, and it's going to look like in this example that is on the screen here, like it's everybody's, going down the line. Everybody's coming in at 9 and everybody's leaving right at 5 p.m. And we know that's not always the case, right?
Right. And you know what? Sometimes it's not even a matter of them trying to say cheat the system or give their buddies more money. Sometimes it's just because it's easier for the
convenient.
supervisor.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to just write 8 hours every day rather than 7 hours and 52 minutes.
Yeah. Or keep track of that, right? I don't remember the exact, time I came in, but
they know I'm budgeted for a 40-hour quarter this week. I'm going to pay the guy 40 hours. I don't. What do I care if he's out for 4 minutes or 8 minutes, here or there? It's just going to make my life a lot easier if I just put 8 Monday through Friday than try to get the exact minute each day. It's just too much work for that one guy to track all that.
So Vince, out of the 1,500 plus employees you have, do any of them work at a cash register? I would say zero, right?
Zero, correct. Well, but, I mean, other than their timesheet, right? They don't.
That's what I was going to say.
There you go.
It's equivalent. Do you think most employees think of their timesheet as equivalent to a till at a retail location with cash in it? that they're
No,
responsible for?
I think they look at it differently. I think they look at time different than money. But time is money. Time is equivalent to money, and it's a limited resource. We can't make it. We can't create it. It's just there, and we're all granted,
Well,
this
to your
resource.
point earlier too, Vince, that that those few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, but if you add that up across 1,500 employees across to every single day, every single week, every month, that ends up being a significant amount of money, I imagine.
It's a huge number across all those people, and that's why you need a system in place to try to minimize what I call time slippage. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's no different than inventory slippage, where someone broke something or took something. Time is something. It's something that can be taken or stolen, right? So there are going to be people who try to circumvent whatever policy and procedures you put in place to track time. It's just how much time and effort or how much micromanaging do you want to sort of control time?
Yeah, or again, if you can implement, technology to facilitate that, because like you said, I think a lot of people just, I don't look at my watch right as I got into work. I just know that I'm supposed to be in here at 9 o'clock, and that's what I'm going to put on my timesheet. But they may be shortchanging themselves too, right? If they showed up a few minutes early or a few minutes late. I think in past, rounding has been in there for a lot of reasons. To make things simpler. They didn't have reasons to do it, but with a lot of time systems today and technology, you can get to the minute, to the second, accurate information, and it can be convenient for the employee to do, so they don't have to, make a note about what time it was. There's a lot of technology out there that makes it very simple to record to the minute and make it convenient for everybody, but also accurate.
Yes, simplicity is key. That's what you just hit on there. Is with all these union rules, just going back to that, there are some that are pretty crazy out there. If they work between 2 and 3 on this day, they get an extra 25 cents per hour. Well, you don't want a system that requires an employee to track that they should get those 25 cents for that hour. So the system should track that. And then as an employee, I should trust that I can view my time card and know that that's been applied and I'm good. And it's a system that just eliminates the need for any mistrust there or time slippage.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't. We want to be fair as an employer. We don't want to take advantage of our employees, nor do we want to be taken advantage of by our employees. It's something that, documenting time correctly, it's fair to both sides. You show up for 8 hours, you deserve to be paid for 8 hours.
Exactly.
And that's the bottom line. It's a mutual benefit if everybody gets paid correctly.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting to me is I don't know what the numbers are, but there's probably still a lot. We know we run into some people still that are using paper timesheets, and they're just like you said, for not reasons of not people not wanting to be dishonest, but just we intentionally round for ourselves or try to remember. And there's a lot of companies I think that are leaving money out there, or potentially even employees that are losing money because they're coming in a little bit earlier. Those few minutes could be attributable to them as well. That there's still this trust factor, or not using technology that's available. That people are writing it down on paper still, and there's just no need for that. Like back to Tom's, it's not necessarily bad. There's just not a need for it.
Yeah, the people will go the path of least resistance. So if it's easier for them to write, 88888, they'll do that way because it's easier for them, and they know they're not going to get questioned by their employees. You take that out of their hands and you automate the process, and now they don't have to explain why they got short the 5 minutes, right? Because the system did it. You were late. It deducted you 5 minutes, or you worked extra 5 minutes, it paid you more.
Yeah.
It just removes that human element out of it. There's no emotion. There's no sort of defending that. It's just, this is what you did. It's actual. It documented the in and out time, and it paid you correctly. There should be no question.
Eliminates that potential factor for conflict too between employee and employer that can erode that trust in other key areas of the company too, I think. So
exactly. So now it takes that out of the foreman's sort of responsibility, and they don't feel pressured to say, let me just pay them their 40 hours. I know they only work 39 this week, but the client's happy, the company's not going to lose money because they're billing for the 40 hours or for that position anyway. No one's hurt. Why don't I just take the path of least resistance?
Yeah, I don't know, Tom, if you want to share real quickly that, because Vince brings up a really good point. It's not just always between employee and employer. It's the supervisor sometimes, that if you don't have an accurate way to do this, then there's a trust factor with supervisors.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a whole episode on the dynamic between supervisors, employees, and employers, because it's such a rich topic. But yeah, absolutely. That trust between supervisors or the foreman and their people that work for them and the employer creates some very interesting dynamics that I think we can mine. Especially, we'll have you back for that one, Vince, because that one's really relevant. But before we conclude, there's one more topic that's not as obvious with trust and time. And maybe, Vince, you can speak to this, but what about allocation? So that's not just time theft or time slippage, but if, let's say you have two buildings next to each other, and let's say Janitronics does a bad contract. To your point, you can't clean that building in the right amount of time. And maybe one foreman's borrowing labor from the other without telling anybody. What does job allocation and where time is conducted, how does that impact decision-making for a company like Janitronics? And why is it important to have accurate time where trust isn't part of it for that?
Well, it's important, right? Because overall, in your example, with that scenario of two buildings, you have company A and company B. Well, why should company B subsidize company A's cleaning? They shouldn't. They should be billed appropriately. If that's the case, I should be lowering the cost for the cleaning program at company B because they don't need all those hours, and increasing the cost at company A because they're using a lot more hours than what they're paying for. So it's fair to track time correctly. It allows you to be fair as a company to your clients and make sure that one isn't subsidizing the other. And two, that's the right thing to do. I mean, we should be recording time as accurately as possible so that they're getting what they're paying for.
Yeah.
And we don't want to basically give them high level quality when they're not paying for it.
Yeah, and to your earlier examples you started with, I assume where there more complex cleaning exists, where clean rooms and that, if that was being subsidized and you didn't know it and the time wasn't properly allocated, let's say you get a new contract that you're bidding on for a clean room, then you might have a temptation to go too low because the time data isn't accurate, which creates a bad decision, possibly a bad contract in a new area. And now as a leadership team, you're wondering, why aren't we making money with this, which creates conflict. So I think that's where some of this removing trust with time tracking to me makes sense. The employees have to realize accurate time tracking means accurate decisions, means a more healthy company, which means better pay, more stability moving forward. Time tracking is no different than cash. And can you imagine a store where they sell item A and they allocate the sale to item B? That's essentially what the time tracking misallocation does. It totally creates an environment where we can't make good decisions about future business too.
Correct. I mean, time transparency is critical in an industry where our cost, 90% of our cost is labor. I mean, that can skew your contracts dramatically if you're shifting labor around to different areas, not when it's not needed.
Absolutely. Well, just to summarize as we end here, the reason maybe we paused on time tracking more than the others, it kind of brings all of these other elements into one. Regulations, we didn't even get into overtime tracking and union rules within time tracking. Ben hinted at it. Money, time is money, absolutely. All of these things kind of coalesce with time tracking, but often time tracking turns into a question of trust with employees, with supervisors, and employers, and we feel like it shouldn't. Just like other areas with money, get trust out of it as much as possible. There's always exceptions to your point, Vince, about the till and giving the wrong change. There's going to have things like that with time tracking, but for the most part, just get rid of trust completely, and it'll mean better decision making, less time slippage, etc. moving forward.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. Paying time should be just like tying up the cash register every day.
Yeah.
This should be no different.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. I know we went a little longer than we wanted, but we could go probably another couple hours on this topic. There's really not many topics more important than trust when it comes to employees, employers, and supervisors. And we will have an episode about supervisors at some point as well, because that one is rich with a lot of content. So, Vince, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. We'll have you back. And thanks for giving your insights and your wealth of experience and knowledge to this topic.
Well, thank you for having me, Tom.
Thanks, everyone.
Vince.